We're all a product of how we were brought up. They want other people to know that they can afford the stuff.
Money talks and wealth whispers.
It's your money. Spend it on what you like. You can't sell the trips to Bali when you're 65.
So, Sinead, I always thought wealth and affluence were one and the same thing, but you have a very different take on it. Can you explain?
I do, Katie. And the difference really for me between wealth and affluence comes from stuff. So when we earn money, how we spend it and what we spend it on, I think marks out whether people are affluent or people are wealthy. So for me, somebody who's affluent likes the trappings of what money can buy. They like the stuff. They want other people to know that they can afford the stuff and they have new things and the latest things and a constant through flow of conspicuous consumption. People who value wealth over that are people who are quietly putting money aside for their future. They have little or no debt. They don't need the stuff to show other people what they do own or do have. It's a more modest interaction with money, but they're using money for a more powerful purpose as they would see it, like their future self or living within their lifestyle. And sometimes it seems to me that people who are affluent or who value having the stuff over the quiet wealth very often can find themselves in a position, especially where they can no longer afford it, that they end up using other people's money to do it. And that's in the form of credit and debt.
So we're saying the big divider between the two of them is debt and what you have put away.
Yeah, I think the big divider is attitude, actually, because we're all a product of how we were brought up and how our parents discussed or dealt with money in our own households. So some people were brought up with lavish spenders and everything was new and they had great Christmas presents and all that kind of thing. And then other people struggled. They might remember their parents poring over bank statements or not having enough money to buy the things that they wanted. And that shapes who we become then as an adult. So let me give you an example of somebody that I would consider very wealthy but not affluent. And he's a man called Ingvar Kamprad. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
So when he died a few years ago, Ingvar Kamprad was worth $58 billion. He drove a 10-year-old Volvo and lived in the house he'd always lived in. And all of his furniture was from IKEA because he was the founder of IKEA. And he was an extraordinarily wealthy man, but not one who valued affluence. Another one would be Warren Buffett.
Yes.
The investor to the stars.
Still in the same
and
house.
Still in the same house in Nebraska, 5-bedroomed house he bought in 1958. He bought it for $31,000. He drives a 10-year-old Cadillac. He is gifting 99% of his wealth while he is still living. And again, there's somebody who is immensely wealthy, but doesn't need the display of affluence to prove it.
Yeah.
Now, affluence to me, you can of course be very affluent and very wealthy. I'm thinking here of any of the Kardashians.
Yes.
Elon Musk would be somebody I'd consider very wealthy and very affluent, or maybe Jeff Bezos. So we love the bling, we love the stuff, we want to buy all of the gear, whether it's planes and islands and cars. And if you are very, very wealthy, well then that's fine. But for most people, ordinary people who aspire to an affluent lifestyle, they don't necessarily have the money to back it up.
So from that point of view, would you agree with the statement, money talks and wealth whispers?
I think that's a great way of putting it. And look, there's nothing wrong with buying stuff. I mean, why do we work if it's not to gather the things around us that we like and need? But it's what you do with your money when your basic needs are met. So once you have shelter, once you have food, once you have heat and light, once you have comfort around you, maybe a means of transport, then beyond that, it's what next? And with that extra money, what we call disposable income, if you're aim in life is to go on nice holidays, buy jewellery, update your car, have designer clothes, well, then that's your that's your affluent choice to spend that money. But people who have quiet wealth instead are much more likely to think of things like keeping debt down, protecting their future self. So that's how they're going to live when that income still isn't coming in retirement, or kind of creating a situation where if something goes wrong or no matter what happens, they are secure because they've made those decisions not to have all the stuff, but to have the quiet wealth sitting there.
Some people like stuff. I like a bit of stuff. I'd like more stuff. However, I do find that when you start building a little nest egg, the want for the stuff can reduce a little bit because you become more interested in being consistent, putting it away and watching something build.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in previous pods where we've talked about, the purpose of savings and the purpose of money. So if you literally can't hang on to your money long enough before you have an urge to spend it, like a child with pocket money, that's going to be very, very difficult for you to cross that bridge. So the people who start early and make it a habit and have purpose for their savings find it much easier. And actually, you can become then quite obsessive, not about having the new stuff, but about watching those savings build up to protect you in the future. Whether that's in savings accounts for holidays, or not making sure your next car is not going to have a loan on it, or your future self in terms of retirement income.
Let's talk about cars, because you wrote an article on this. And you kind of set the scene very nicely, where it was two people living side by side, and one person had the two shiny, brand spanking new cars in the driveway. But then you made the point they might be up to their ears in debt, that they might be on PCP. So, is PCP something we should avoid if we want to become wealthy and not be merely affluent?
Look, some people like cars. I'm not one of them, so I'm not going to kind of preach to people. If you love the shiny new smell of a car and you want the 252 reg plate, and that's really important to you, to the detriment of other things in your life or your future life, fine. However, for a lot of people, it's a means of transport, and as long as it's safe and fits the kids and the dog, you probably don't care what it is. The issue with PCP, which is personal contract plans, which are only available on brand new cars, is that they are designed specifically for people who want the affluence over the wealth. They can't afford the car. And this is a way of saying, but you can. You can have a brand new shiny SUV in the driveway. Your husband can have one too. And we're going to make sure that happens for you on seemingly low or no interest rates. So it's incredibly attractive. But make no mistake, it is of course a debt, a loan, somebody else's money. So to take that decision is very consciously deciding that I cannot afford to buy this product outright, and few of us can. However, I feel I need it more than the security of not having this debt hanging over me. So a person who's more interested in the wealth build-up still needs a car maybe, but what they'll do is they'll say, look, I don't want to take on a loan from this. I don't want to have that hanging over my neck. What I'm going to do is I'm going to buy the one I can afford with the savings I have. And from day one, because I'm not servicing a loan, I'm going to start saving for the next change of car in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, and build up your little nest egg that way. And in the meantime, yes, you transport. Nobody's going to be jealous of you. But it's completely affordable. And if everything else goes pear-shaped, you still have your car.
What about property? How is there a wealth affluence divide there?
I think there is, and it's not so much in the number of properties. So lots of wealthy people have more than one home. They live in one and they've other properties because they might be investment properties. Where it's about affluence, or where that's your mindset, it's about the stuff and the showing off of the stuff, you'll tend to find that they have properties they want to tell everybody about. So it's a holiday home maybe in Spain, or it's a timeshare villa, or it's, something that is for their lifestyle. Now, it may well turn out to be a good decision financially, but you're kind of invested emotionally in it and in the lifestyle that indicates to you and to other people. Those that have quiet wealth have no emotional attachment to what they invest their money in. So it's about the maths, it's about the return, it's about the investment, and they're as happy to sell it off as buy it. And that is a much healthier attitude to building up wealth. Because you don't care where the flat is, you don't care what money's in, you don't mind if it's in commercial buildings or in equities or in, some other asset, because it's doing its job in the background. Nobody's going to know about it, nobody's going to see it, you're not going to have anything to show for it, except for yourself in the future.
What do you like in this regard? Do you like stuff?
I think I had a very bad experience with an investment early on in life, and I made what I thought was a good choice at the time. It turned out not to be one, and I've been extremely cautious since then. So that kind of has framed how I look at money and stuff. So I'm not somebody who is naturally inclined to stuff. Certainly, I think at my age now, I would be absolutely say to people, please don't buy me more stuff. Christmas is coming up. I don't want stuff. Okay. And by that, I mean, I don't want them spending money on some shiny bauble. I'd much prefer an experience or a memory, or failing that, books. So I think that as we age, as we get older, the stuff we have accumulated around us gathers dust, and I'm not sure that we need any more. That doesn't make it good or bad. It's just the way that I feel at the moment.
Yeah.
And I can't see that changing. I love travel. And if I have a splurge, or if I want to spend my money on something, that would be the first thing I would think about, rather than the last thing. But I want that paid for in advance. I absolutely find debt abhorrent of any kind. In fact, the only good debt for me is mortgage debt, because it's dirt cheap and you've got a growing asset underneath it. Every other form of debt is bad debt.
I imagine that's something you hammer home to your children.
Yes, it is, because look, you want to give the best life lessons to your kids. And look, once kids earn their own money, they're in their 20s, they should absolutely enjoy it. Go do the travel, go buy a car, go buy nice clothes. You've earned it by working hard, but also have a plan. So you're getting real money for the first time in your 20s, your own money, where you're not going to have to account to anybody for how you spend it once your bills are paid, or maybe you've no bills at that age. So having a plan around that, I think, is even more important, because it's very easy to fritter away your money and arrive at the end of the month and feel you've been mugged, but not be able to work out how or where the money went. So I'm a big fan of budgeting. Setting out budgets, living within your means where possible. Credit is available, but I would always encourage people to use it very sparingly and for asset building purposes. So taking out a student loan to get you through a master's, that's good debt. You're going to earn more money afterwards, you're going to be able to pay it back. Buying a house with it, always good debt. But buying a car you can't afford because it's fancier than the one you can afford, I just don't see that. That's depreciating debt, and that's a terrible idea.
Tell me more about good debt, or because I remember in this piece you talked about the intangible assets. So tell me, are there other examples of that?
There are, because when I say the word investing to you, what are you investing in? You might suddenly start thinking about boring things like, equities and gilts and bonds and all that kind of thing. But actually, investing in yourself can be a fantastic asset building. So the first way we tend to invest in ourselves is in the educational space, okay, by improving ourselves and getting more qualifications. And obviously there's a cost for that. And I think that's usually a very, very good idea. Investing in wellness in that space. Now, I'm not one for the woo-ah, crystals and all that, but I absolutely think it's a great idea to invest in healthcare. to invest in, if you can afford it, private health insurance, to invest in looking after yourself, and whether that involves paying for a gym or skincare or, you know, something that makes you a better, safer person for the future. I think that's a super idea, and that might include mental health supports. It might include, you know, buying proper runners so you can start going out for a run. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. People should be encouraged to invest a little in themselves. And I think women, once they have children, get very bad at that because all their energy goes into supplying things, using their money to supply things for others. I think it's really important that we start paying ourselves first.
So what I'm hearing is if you got a lump sum tomorrow, it would not be going in a Chanel handbag. You'd probably increase increase your AVCs on your pension.
Tragically and boringly, you've nailed that, Katie. That's exactly, I think, what I would do. Certainly at my age, I am far more concerned about how the retirement years are going to look and feel financially than I am about having a handbag and running for the presidency.
But this is, but you know what? In her defence, if you're going to have any handbag, it's the ultimate investment handbag.
You're not convincing me. Well, by the way, I know nothing about this area. Nobody would ever send me shopping for fashionable items. So I'm never in any danger of accidentally buying an Hermes handbag, I'm afraid. It's not for me. I do know people that buy, let's call them alternative asset classes. And whether it's bedding down whiskey or buying designer stuff that you hope will turn a profit for you, or, you know, jewellery, knock yourself out. But I think I'd need to know a lot more about those assets than I do.
Yeah. But you mentioned the retirement years there, and this is interesting because I guess this is where the quietly wealthy, you know, really kind of reveal themselves because they're nicely set up. Whereas the affluent people, I imagine it could be a pretty scary time where you start to assess what you've accumulated and you realise that a Chanel handbag probably won't pay for your eating.
Well, the problem with spending your money throughout your life on stuff is that you're not building wealth. You're getting the stuff now, it's instant gratification, and that certainly makes you feel better for a short period of time. But you can't sell the trips to Bali when you're 65. You can bring the memories with you for sure. And it's about finding that balance. So 50% of Ireland, 50% of Irish people will be wholly and entirely dependent on the state in their retirement years. And that rises to 2/3 of self-employed people. Now, the state pension, as it stands now, is just over €15,000 a year. So we absolutely have to, if we want to earn more than that in retirement, and we think we might need more than that in retirement, we have to provide that for ourselves. And happily, the state really, really wants you to do that too. So they reserve all of their best tax supports for somebody who's prepared to do that through their life, to mind themselves in post-career in their retirement years. And it is a real divider of wealth versus affluence. When you see somebody, that there used to be an old saying when I worked in the insurance industry a million years ago, and it was, the difference between an old man and a retired gentleman is a good pension.
Oh.
And, you know, it does hold true. And people who haven't worried so much about the stuff in their life find that that transition is a lot easier, because when they arrive then at 65, they can collect all that money that they would have spent on other things. It's sitting now there waiting for you for these years when you have no capacity to earn more money. So in your lifetime, in your career, you can always go for the bigger, higher, better job. But once you're retired, there is no bigger, higher, better. You won't be able to access credit. You can't work harder to earn more money, but your bills are still coming in. And you want to have a nice lifestyle rather than just survive. So the state pension helps you survive. Anything more than that, you need to be building wealth.
Yeah. That is very sobering. The retired gentleman, old man. That's very, very... Because it's funny, because, you know, it's all about keeping up with the Joneses and outward displays. But, you know, at that age, that's when you really want to be thinking about outward displays, you know, just not having enough after the age of 60. It's not very becoming, is it?
Well, you do. Well, what you find then is that people who, I mean, if you ask any 65-year-old who hasn't been able to or has chosen not to wealth build in their life, the one financial decision that they might have made differently, almost always it's, I wish I had started a pension sooner. And this is part of the reason that the government is bringing in automatic enrolment. You know, it's not going to be enough. Let's fool ourselves. It's not going to be nearly enough for anybody joining it. But it's a start. And it builds up that mindset of it being so important. We're living so long now. Katie, anybody born in 2025 can reasonably expect to live to 100. Now, if you're not working for 35 of those years, and you are working for 35 of those years, you need to put some of that income aside for the period that you won't be able to work.
But you know what? I also think that generation will be working until 75, if not 80.
Well,
I really
they
do.
might, but remember, that's a consequence of these actions.
Yeah.
That's a choice. Now, it might be a choice the state has to take because it's not courageous enough to kick out, you know, to do anything else.
Germany's made moves there already. Did you see that?
Yeah,
They're giving people, they can work now until they're 70 tax free, like after you leave the workplace.
Well, part of the reason for that is falling birth rates. So we have a situation in Ireland at the moment where every single person, and by the way, 70 people retire every day in Ireland, 70 new pensioners every day. And at the moment, there are 4.5 taxpayers for each one of those. But by 2045, there will only be 2. That's a situation Italy finds itself in now, and to a certain extent France. And that's unsupportable because the taxpayers have to pay for the roads and the schools and the hospitals and everything else that's being paid for. So to pay for a whole pensioner on your own or half a pensioner on your own is very, very expensive. So governments around Europe are now having to decide between lowering the amount of the pension or delaying out the age at which it's paid. And governments have to be elected. And, you know, in Ireland, TDs do not get elected by introducing new taxes or you know, taking money off pensioners. So they've had to push out the pension age because that's all that's left.
Yes.
And that therein lies the difficulty. So I'd prefer not to wait and hope and cross my fingers that the government will sort all this out by the time I retire. I have to choose to do that myself and help myself. I will take the 15,000 happily from the state. I've paid my PRSI. It's mine. But I want more than that. I want to live on more than 15,000 a year because to me that's just getting by.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the person listening to this and they identify as affluent, what steps can they take now to start becoming wealthy?
Well, I think it's really about setting out goals and dreams. So let's start with that because that's a fun exercise. So it's not about me or anybody else banging you over the head and saying you're spending your money on the wrong things. I mean, it's your money. You can really pretty much spend it on what you like. But it's not always going to be there. And it may not always be there in the same amount. So if your goals and dreams in later years aren't being met and aren't already catered for, well, then sitting down to say, how can I assist that process, to me is the first thing to do. And that might mean a chunk of change now for that future. But you're going to be helped every step of the way. The government is going to take your money. So let's say you put in 60 euros. If I stood at the door and charged you 60 euros but handed you 100, you'd be queuing around the corner to take it off me. That's what a pension is. So you put in 60 overnight without any investment whatsoever, it becomes 100 for a top rate taxpayer. So it's a complete no-brainer. There is literally no other investment that I have ever come across that will do that for you consistently and safely and in a guaranteed way for as long as you live.
Absolutely. Sinead Ryan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.